There's an ongoing civil war, at least that's what some are referring to it as, within the Republican Party. And recently, Jonathan Swan, who's one of the reporters over at Axios, weighed in on it during an interview with Mediaite. Let's hear what he had to say.
Now that Trump is out of the White House, do you have a sense of how much power he still has over the Republican Party? I mean, is he still calling shots now that he's retreated to Mar-a-Lago?
Does he have power? Of course he has power. He's the most, by far, the most popular Republican in the country with Republican voters. It's not even close. So of course he has power. He has substantial power, but he doesn't use it in a strategic or thoughtful or methodical way. He's entirely governed by himself and his ego, and sees everything through his own aggrandizement. We ran a poll on Axios the other night where we measured among Republican voters the popularity of Kevin McCarthy, Mitch McConnell, Marjorie Taylor Greene, and Liz Cheney. And Kevin McCarthy was the most popular, followed by, in terms of approval, followed by Marjorie Taylor Greene. And then some distance later were Mitch McConnell and Liz Cheney. So you want to know where the Republican voters are? They're much closer to, many of them anyway, the Trump side of the party than they are to the Liz Cheney, McConnell side of the party. I don't see any signs of cohesion. The party is fighting within itself, and there's going to be a lot of blood letting between now and 2024.
So we see some of that, conflict pour out into the open. Senator Mitch McConnell referred to QAnon conspiracy theorists within the Republican Party, people like Marjorie Taylor Greene, as cancer. It's a pretty strong statement, but I agree. I can't believe I agree with McConnell on anything. But what do you make of all of this, Francesca? Because Republicans have been really good about cohesion. Like, they've been really good about, at the end of the day, we all agree with each other. And when it comes to our votes, we're going to vote in a partisan way. Do you think that's going to change?
Well, I think that's a really good point, because I feel like progressives and leftists, we always get so upset at one another because we're like, well, why can't we just get it together? And it's like, oh, well, because we believe in democracy and a plurality of voices and real diversity and multiracial representation. Like, we actually believe in things that are different than fascism. When you believe in authoritarian fascism, or rule by the rich only, or rule by a white minority, or like, it's all very easy. And I just want to remind folks of that. Like, it's good that it's more difficult to get it together on the left. It means that we actually have a diversity of voices. So that's one. But I think with the Republican Party, man, I'm excited. I just want Trump to start the Patriot Party. I'm really excited because that will offer the Republicans an actual opportunity to make a break with the Trumpists and with MAGA and draw a line in the sand. I do think we're going to see a radical reshifting of what the Republican Party stands for, what it is. And every single time the Republican Party has changed in our country's history, it's always been over like issues of slavery, racism, the same issues, the foundational, sins of our country that we still have not reckoned with. And Trump is he is an emblem of that sin, given that his entire legacy is one of racism and division, right? And xenophobia. So this is par for the course for the Republican Party in their history. They're dividing up over a, white supremacist. What else is new?
And remember, there was growing pressure for House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy to punish Liz Cheney for voting in favor of impeaching Donald Trump by essentially stripping her of any type of leadership role that she has within the House of Representatives under the Republican Party. And he did not end up doing that. So there are some arguments being made that the ever growing and, in my opinion, more powerful QAnon wing of the Republican Party, can't always get what it wants. But that might just be a product of the more traditional Republicans, attempting to keep their party together. But I think you're right. I think, pretty soon we'll see that division grow even greater. And it all really depends on what voters want, right? The Republican electorate is where we should be paying all of our attention to, because as Swan mentioned in that interview, people like Marjorie Taylor Greene, people like Donald Trump are incredibly popular among Republican voters. And that's part of the reason why I didn't think it would make sense to kick Marjorie Taylor Greene out of the Republican Party or out of the House of Representatives. As much as I dislike her, she won by an overwhelming margin in that House race in Georgia. And if we live in a democracy, then we can't, on one hand, make arguments in favor of our democratic process and maintaining it when it comes to this impeachment trial that's taking place with Donald Trump. And then on the other hand, say that, hey, we should just boot right-wing politicians that we dislike. And by the way, I mean, if there's evidence of her currently doing things, saying things, or inciting violence toward her political opponents in the House, that's a different story. But I think that the consequences that she is now facing by getting her committee roles stripped away from her are important. I'm glad that they went in that direction. Now, Natalie Batiste from Mother Jones wrote an excellent piece on this so-called civil war within the Republican Party. And she made a point that I wanted to share with you guys regarding, her whole thesis is that there is no civil war. Like the Republican, like we know their identity, right? And the proof is in the pudding. And she actually went back to 2012 and she talked about the autopsy that came out of that election. Remember, Mitt Romney lost to Barack Obama. Republicans just can't seem to win the popular vote. And in that case, they couldn't even win the Electoral College. And so they came away with that, the Republican Party, with this emphasis on changing their messaging in order to appeal to women, the LGBTQ community, and people of color. Among the conclusions, as Baptiste writes in Mother Jones, was the importance of reaching out to women, non-white, and young voters, as well as expanding absentee voting among their base, and jettisoning the need to impose some version of ideological purity on party members. The report also emphasized the need for the party to recalibrate its views on immigration and gay rights. And so they have like this autopsy and they're like, don't worry, let's just wait till 2016. We're gonna be doing this campaigning to appeal to diverse groups of people. And then what happened? Trump comes in and he's like, yeah, oh, that's your autopsy? Let me see it, oh. Cool, that's great. Mexicans are murderers and drug dealers and rapists. And I mean, he had the most disgusting, divisive language. And guess what? The Republican electorate went along with that. So the argument here is there ain't no civil war. The identity of the Republican Party is pretty firm at this point, regardless of the grumbling coming from people like Mitch McConnell. What do you think about that?
Whew, I mean, it's a long conversation. It's a big conversation. I mean, I've argued that Trump is kind of the outgrowth of decades of dog whistling from the Republican Party. And you're right, that moment of 2012, look, like the demographics are changing in the United States. It's not about white genocide, it's just about they're changing, man. Like that's what's going on, right? So what are we gonna do about it? How do we get with the actual times? How do we not demonize these communities whose votes we actually need? How can we create these policies that appeal to them? And they were like, no, we're gonna go full fash. And it was on Republican leadership to actually put up someone who could go against Trump. But when they realized they were all just fighting with one another, Cruz and Rubio falling over each other, Jeb Bush, just like really Jeb Bush was gonna be your guy. And they didn't have a person who they could use as a countervailing force. And so they just went with Trump. And instead of reining him in, because it's one thing to, okay, look, he's your nominee, go with it. He wins, fine. But can you at all rein him in? Can you at all put down any kind of, can you actually muscle any kind of power as as Republicans beyond Trumpism, and no, they either couldn't or they wouldn't, right? And they've just fallen farther and farther and farther into this quicksand. And until here we are, we have Marjorie Taylor, Jewish lasers green. And like, I agree with you that might be where the most popularity is, but sometimes the thing that isn't popular is the thing we have to stand for. And so once again, back to the morality whispering of this party, is there going to be someone, I've been like, I'm looking at like Adam Kinzinger, he's a Republican from Illinois. Like there's some people in Congress, there's some people who are, obviously there's the Justin Amash's, which is just Justin Amash. But there are just a few people who it's like, who's gonna be the one to step out? Who's gonna try and be a leader? Clearly Mitt Romney, nobody wants Romney. Nobody wants him any which way, green eggs and Romney, nobody wants. But like, Romney's trying. I'm not knocking him for trying. I think it is important, but like there should be a new class. And I would argue even further, there should be a new class of Republican woman. Like there should be more women who can rise to prominence within the party without being full-blown nut jobs, without being the Sarah Palins, the Michelle Bachmans, the Marjorie Taylor Greens. I believe that there are some smarter conservative women out there, but maybe not. Hey, Anna, look, here we are. We're still waiting.
We'll see how it plays out. But I would, as much as I dislike these people, I mean, I want an opposition party that's reasonable, that doesn't peddle conspiracy theories and all sorts of dangerous falsehoods. We might disagree and engage in robust debate regarding issues, political issues that we disagree on. But at least we're all on planet Earth and we're making arguments in good faith. I'd like to get back to that.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.